This is chapter 6. We're looking at bone tissue. This first figure is from figure 6.1. This is just showing you where you find the different types of bones. We'll go over those here in just a minute, and the cartilages. So the top brown there is the bones of the axial skeleton. And then we've got bones of the appendicular skeleton. I really like this picture because it shows you where you're going to find hyaline cartilage. And after going through the tissues a couple chapters ago, you understand that we've got 3 types of cartilage. The hyaline cartilage is the most common. That's the one found at the end of all your long bones. You can see my pictures here. Also found at the costal cartilage. If you would get an inflammation here of the costal cartilage, that would be costocarditis, the inflammation of that cartilage. From the hyaline cartilage, we have elastic cartilage. I told you the 2 places that I know of are the cartilage in the external ear, and then you can't see it in the picture here, but up in the throat, in the epiglottis, that would be elastic cartilage. And then finally fibrocartilage, which we find between all of the vertebrae as a pad between the pubis bones, so the pubic symphysis, and then the meniscus of the knee are made up of fibrocartilage. Okay, we classify our bones as axial and appendicular. Axial skeleton is made up of the skull. See my picture here, the skull, the vertebrae, the rib cage, and then it also picks up the sternum. So that's the axial. The appendicular, short for appendages. So this is going to be the bones of the upper and the lower limbs, including all of your shoulder and your hip bones. So this is one way to classify bones. Another way to classify them is based on their shape. So let's look at these. Oh, it's only one picture. Okay, so A up here, we have a long bone. Long bones are longer than they are wide. So the bones in your arm, your upper arm, your lower arm, your hands, even your phalanges, your fingers, these are all considered long bones. We'll look at why they're long bones later. It has to do with what else there, but just keep in mind that they're longer than they are wide. B is going to be my short bones. My short bones typically are cube-shaped, and this is what you find in the wrist or the ankles. And sometimes we have bones that form within tendons, like the patella is going to be a short bone. Next, so C, we have flat bones. They show the sternum, but it's not just the sternum. Flat bones are thin, flattened, and a bit curved at the edges. So the sternum, but like all the bones of your skull, would be considered flat bones. And then finally, D are my irregulars. They don't seem to fit anywhere. They have complicated shapes. So the vertebrae and then your hip bones down here, these are all irregulars as well. So, okay. When it comes to your bones, sorry, I keep flashing that slide. I think that I have another picture coming up. When it comes to the function of the bone, you can tell from my skeleton here that it works to support it. It creates this framework that supports the body, and then it also cradles the soft organs. And speaking of the soft organs, it's going to be there for protection. So support and protect provides this protective case, particularly for, more important, the organ. Think about how much protection we put around the brain and spinal cord, but even the vital organs are all protected. There are a few exceptions with that. Your kidneys are not protected by your vertebrae or by your rib cage. So support, protection, and movement. It's going to provide levers so you can move. That's where we tie into the muscles. The next function are mineral storage. So this is a reservoir for minerals, especially calcium and phosphorus. Finally, we have blood cell formation. This is known as hematopoiesis, also known as hemopoiesis. This occurs within the marrow cavities of the bones. Now, when it comes to your bones, you can see that we've got all these depressions and markings and bulges and all sorts of things. These, a lot of times, are sites of attachment for muscles, ligaments, and tendons. Sometimes you look at them and they're actually a joint surface, so where 2 bones come together. If they're a small hole, they become a conduit for blood vessels and then nerves. Here it is, table 6. So this goes over some of the different bone markings, and some of these are really important to us. Tuberosities are important to us. You can see large rounded projection may be rough, and a good example of that is the tibial tuberosity, found on the top of the tibia up by your knee. Crest, this is just a row of, it's a ridge, usually sticks out. Trochanters are large, blunt, irregular surfaces. You've got trochanters on your femur, on your upper leg bone. You have a greater and a lesser trochanter. Lines are narrow ridges of bones, so we're not going to go through all these. Tubercles are important. Those are small rounded projections. We'll have several of those. One that's really important in this class and in the athletic training, sports medicine, intro to human body system class are the epicondyles. Epicondyles are above the condyles. Well, condyles are where two surfaces come together. The epicondyles are right above those, and this is where we connect ligaments. So you can go on and read through the rest of these, the spine. We use the word process down here for any bony prominence. That's just what we do. And you can see the rest of these. Some of these are really important. So we'll talk about heads. That's the, you've got a head and neck on your femur. It's where your hip anchors in. We've already talked about condyles. Meatus. You have an external auditory meatus. That's your ear canal. Okay. Sinus is just that. You can see it's a cavity within the bone. Fossas are shallow areas or reticular surfaces, grooves, fissures. Foramen are really important because this is where you find the openings for blood vessels. So you've got what's called the mental foramen right on your chin up here. Even my skeleton Franklin back there have foramen on his chin, the mental foramen. And then he also has a supraorbital foramen up above the eye. Anyway, there's foramen all over us. That's the purpose of those. Okay, this is the structure of the long bone. It's figure 6.3. You can see that we have two major parts of the long bone. We have the epiphyses, that's the swollen ends, and then we have the diaphysis. Okay, let's start with the diaphysis, the long shaft. This forms the axis of the long bone. It's composed of compact bone that surrounds what's called the medullary cavity. So there's my compact bone and then the medullary cavity running down the middle. It's in this medullary cavity that you find yellow marrow. Yellow marrow is mainly made up of fats. Now, the compact ends, or the expanded ends, the epiphyses here, same thing, you've got compact bone on the outside. You can see there's what compact bone looks like. And then the interior is that spongy bone. So you've got that trabeculae of spongy bone. But look, you've got this joint surface that's covered with hyaline cartilage. Remember I said before that hyaline cartilage covers all your long bones. Well, there it is. Now this is kind of cool. This is unique down here. Going through the epiphyses, you have what's called the epiphyseal line or the epiphyseal plate. And that's what separates your diaphysis from the epiphyses. You can learn it as the epiphyseal line, but many of you have probably heard it called the growth plate. Now, as far as moving out, you can see that we've left the epiphyses and we're leaving the diaphyses. We're going outside of the long bone here into the periosteum. Peri is around, osteum is bone, so we're around the bone. This is a double layer protective membrane that you see here on the outside. Now, the fibrous outer layer is dense regular connective tissue, but I think the cool one is the inner layer. It's the osteogenic layer. Think about that word for a second. Osteo is bone, genic is formation. And so you find different cells in there. You find osteoblasts, that's O-S-T-E-O-B-L-A-S-T, and osteoclast, O-S-T-E-O-C-L-A-S-T. When it comes to those two, osteoblast with a B, they build bone. Osteoclast with a C, they tear the bone down. We'll go into that a little more when we go into some formation, but for now, just know that. Osteoblast build, osteoclast tear down. You can see that we've got blood supply going to these bones because your bone is a live tissue. So you see nerve and blood entering. You also get lymphatic vessels that go into the bone, and they go in via those foramen. They're called nutrient foramen at this point. And then we have these underlying fibers here. I learned them as Sharpie's fibers, but you can also use perforating fibers. It's those perforating fibers that are there to connect the bone to the periosteum. And then this tissue that's surrounding the bone, eventually it's going to tie right into your tendons and your ligaments, depending on if you're tying muscle bone or bone to bone. Just to separate those two out, if you're tying two bones together, that's a ligament. If you're putting a muscle on a bone and attaching that, that's a tendon. Okay, so that's where this periosteum comes into play, and those perforating fibers to connect that tissue right into the bone. Now on the inside here in my medullary cavity, you can see that I've got a layer. This is endosteum. This is just a very delicate membrane that covers the internal surfaces of the bone. Okay, I want to finish this video here, and we'll pick up in our next one.